Welcome to the Health by Haven podcast. I'm your host, Haven Quinlan. If you're a multi-passionate wellness enthusiast, then you're in the right place. I'm obsessed with learning as much as I can about the wellness world, and I want to share that with you. Each episode will dive into various aspects of health and wellness through inspiring and informative guest interviews with some solo episodes thrown in. Tune in for all things health, and let's have some fun, shall we? All right, today on the Health by Haven podcast, we have my friend and fellow Pure Barre instructor, Sarah Wyland, on the show. Sarah is a marketer by day, but a bar instructor by early morning and evening. And she is also a writer by evening. And so we're going to chat just all the things today, some health related, some not. But with that, Sarah, how's your day been? What have you been up to?
It's been good. I took a couple of bar classes this morning. I just ate like a quick, really early lunch, late breakfast. And now I'm hanging out with you and playing with my dogs at the same time.
Amazing. Okay, I think we actually have to get started by you telling us more about your dogs because we love the pups around here.
Well, I have two. I have Griff is a little bit of everything. He is a rescue pup that I got when I lived in LA, and they did a DNA test on his litter. He's this little scruffy thing. He's Chihuahua, Pomeranian, Poodle, Bichon Frise, Cocker Spaniel, and then it says other. So,
oh my gosh.
Griff is a whole personality. He's just chaotic. He's a chaotic little dog. And then I have Knox. Knox is like my little OG. He is a Yorkie. He's 12 years old and he's doing really well right now. But Knox has had a little bit of a health journey himself lately he's got pulmonary hypertension. So we're supposed to be keeping him calm, but he is currently playing fetch. So I've given up. The first week I was he was at UT Vet Med for a while. And the first week he was home, I was like, don't do anything. No, I'm like, you know what? You want to play? Just play.
Well, hopefully it's a good sign that he still wants to run around and play. And
it is. Yeah, it is. That's what they were like, just if he wants to play, let him play. And I'm like, okay, I'm just paranoid. I'm such a paranoid dog mom. I'm like, are you okay? Is your tongue still the right color? Are you okay? So,
it's hard when they can't actually talk to you and tell you how they're feeling. So
yeah. And I've learned so much about how to keep up with a dog's respiratory system. And so one of the signs that they're struggling is their tongue and gums turn blue. And so I'm good about it now, but the first week I was like, what color is your tongue? Is your tongue still pink? Are you okay? And he's just like, stop touching me. So
Mom, I'm fine.
Yeah. He's like, I'm fine. Throw the ball.
Oh goodness. Okay. Well, I kind of want to start with talking about Pure Barre. That's how you and I met a few years ago now, and a shared love between the two of us. And of course, it kind of connects to the theme of the show with health and fitness. So if you don't mind, for people who don't know you, give a little background on, I guess, your life in the fitness world, but also how you found Pure Barre, why you became interested and became a teacher.
Okay, so I'm trying to think how many years ago it was exactly. It was a while ago. I had taken just a regular bar class. I went to the local gym. It was a social group I was in. It was just an outing that we did. And I really liked it. And I was like, that was fun. And my friend Ashton was like, you should go to Pure Barre. And so I was like, I'll check that out. But it was a little self-conscious. And I was like, I don't know. So I signed up for a 7 a.m. Saturday morning Pure Barre class because I was like, no one's going to be there at 7 a.m. I'll go in. And I was in the middle of a pretty substantial weight loss journey at the time. So I was super self-conscious. And I was like, no one will be there. It'll be if I'm bad at it, no one will know. Well, the class is absolutely packed. So I go in, I take class, and I'm the whole time, I hate this. I hate every second of it. It's terrible. I don't want to do this anymore. And then I walked out right to the front desk, and I was like, I'd like that unlimited membership you talked about before class. Thanks. Because it was so hard during it. And it was this is miserable. I can't hold a plank. I can't do the arms the whole time. What am I doing? Why am I here? Yet I loved it. And I still to this day can't explain where that like dichotomy of like, I mean, I was miserable in that workout. And then I was like, I got to do it again. So I went out and I like bought socks and I did all the things, got my membership, and I started going right off the bat, 6 a.m., 5 days a week, and just absolutely loved it. Like I went from being, wouldn't say totally stationary, but like I would go on like walks and stuff to being like a 6 a.m. at the bar. And that was before they had all the other methods. So it was like, quote, just classic. And for it's like exactly a year at Pure Barre Charlottesville. And I was starting to think about like, maybe I want to teach this. I don't know. And a different method opened a bar studio in the same building I worked in. So I emailed and was like, I'm interested in teaching. And I've never taught any fitness before. I've just been taking bar for like a year. I really like it. And went to auditions. And the studio was called Bard, BARRE.D. And I went to auditions, almost didn't go. I had to like talk myself into going and ended up teaching, but also meeting my very best friend. She owned it. And so I taught there for, like 2, 3 years, and then actually moved down to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, opened a bar studio. And confession, I hated running the studio. I loved teaching classes. I loved training the instructors. That day to day all the things was awful for me. Like I just I was less interested in like bills and money and finances and like the toilet flooded and I had to fix it. I was way less interested in that type of stuff. Um, and it was a brand new building, like a brand new construction project. And it's a very long story, but basically our floor exploded. And that is quite literally what happened. The
Oh my
floor just
gosh.
like, it was a hardwood floor and it completely buckled. And we went through a lot of like back and forth about getting it fixed. And we did finally get it fixed. We had to close for a whole summer.
Oh my
Finally got
gosh.
it fixed. Um, and as I was getting ready to reopen, and I'm like overly optimistic sometimes, I'm like, it's fine because UNC is back. Like right now, it's perfect time for like a grand opening. The floor buckled again. And
Stop.
that was exactly. And that was what, like, I was like, we can't do this. So we closed it down and it ended up being just like an absolute blessing because COVID happened a few months later. And I ended up wanting to go to grad school in LA. And like, I couldn't have done that if I still had the studio. So I didn't teach for probably a year and a half, 2 years. But then when I moved out to LA, I was bored. Like I was working from home and like LA's COVID lasted a lot longer than a lot of places. And so
Mhm.
you couldn't go a lot of places, do a lot of things. And the Pure Barre studio there was advertising for front desk people. And I was like, I could do that. And so I emailed and then we were talking and we found out I taught and she was like, oh my gosh, do you want to teach? Will you teach? And I'm like, can I? And so I did my Pure Barre training in COVID. So I did I did three. No, I didn't Power in person, but I did reform training and Pure Barre training
Oh my
remote,
gosh.
and
You
it
went to
was awful.
classic remote.
I
Oh,
did classic remote. It was 4 days on the computer, and they were East Coast and I was West Coast.
oh no.
Training started at 7 a.m. So
Oh,
I actually got griff on the last day of that training. So
no
I was
way.
like watching the clock. I was like, hurry up, finish this up because I have to drive to Sherman Oaks and pick up my dog. Like,
Oh,
so yeah, I mean that's like a long journey, but that's how I got into it. And like I taught at San Pedro and Redondo Beach in LA and loved it. I mean, absolutely just like so much fun and moved back to Nashville. So ended up teaching at Murfreesboro and then kind of fell into a job opportunity here in Knoxville. And now I'm at Pure Barre Knoxville and Farragut with you.
yay. Well, I'm so glad that journey brought you here. And I cannot believe I didn't know that you opened a studio, Sarah.
I didn't know that.
I
Yeah,
need
no, it
way
was
more information on this. Tell me
yeah,
everything.
it was one of those things like sometimes I think I like willed it into existence because we initially had thought so our studio in Charlottesville was doing really, really well. But we were like, well, we'll open a second location on the other side of Charlottesville because like the northern half was expanding and growing, lots of new subdivisions and shopping. And it was like every time we went to any like open retail location, we just couldn't get the ball rolling. And then we had a friend who owned a cycle studio. She has a few cycle studios throughout the Southeast, and she had recommended Chapel Hill. And I'd gotten a little antsy. Like I was working in marketing for a student travel company. I kept like being passed over for promotions, kind of being told like, oh, you're too valuable where you are, like that kind of thing. And so all the pieces like fell into place for Chapel Hill. And like you look back and you're like, man, that was a little too easy because it was like everything was a no in Charlottesville. And then I moved down to Chapel Hill and it happened really quickly. It was like, yes, here's this place. You know what? We'll build the whole thing out for you. You don't have to finance it. Yet like everything just happened really quickly. And then it all closed really quickly. So I think it was only open like 6 months, 9 months before everything. And fun fact, it's actually still, if you're in Chapel Hill and you go to the location, it's still there. So
Oh,
no one
wow.
has moved. No one has moved into that location. It's like this big condo and retail thing. And no, one of my friends still lives there, and if she's downtown on Franklin Street, she'll like take a photo and like send it to
Yeah.
me. Like the bars are still on the wall, like the whole thing. So it's a poorly constructed building, and it's like no longer a secret that it's a poorly constructed building.
Hmm.
So it's this really valuable piece of real estate on Franklin Street in the heart of UNC's campus that like no one uses. But we had a great clientele. Like if the studio was structurally sound, I think it would have gone really well. But I
Hmm.
did not, like I said, I didn't enjoy all that like nitty gritty ownership stuff of like making the schedules and then like an instructor no shows or all that stuff. I was like, no, but I loved teaching and I loved like training my instructors and building the community. It was just that like logistical stuff and then finance. Like, no, not for me.
Well, what a great learning experience that ended up working out, I guess, for the better of like figuring out, okay, the part of bar that I like is the teaching part and not the like back end business type stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And like all like during all of that too, like I had gotten into weightlifting and CrossFit. And so I was like doing that too. And it was a lot of just like, again, you look back and you're like, man, like I was putting my body through it and probably not recovering well. Because I would go
Hmm.
like teach an early morning Pure Barre class, work all day, either teach an evening class or go straight to the gym because I was competing in weightlifting meets at the time and just like beating my body up. And then like come home, stay up way too late, trying to like write and do stuff, go to bed, do it all over again. So I'm like, okay, we've learned some balance, sort of. I'm still not great about going to bed when I should, but
Oh my gosh, there's so much stuff I want to talk to you about because that just reminded me how you're a fellow Enneagram 3.
yeah,
I am as
yep.
well. And the balance is a struggle for me too. So
Mhm.
talk to us more about that. Like obviously you've had kind of like almost different lives. It seems
A
like with the
hundred
different
percent.
jobs. And
Mhm.
like when have you found like a rhythm with things and when has balance been a challenge for you?
Yeah, no, I like to say, I tell people all the time, I'm like, I think being an Enneagram 3 is like the worst one because it's like I can't like stop. Like I explain it as like I have a lot of energy in my body, and if I don't expend it, I actually have a harder time.
Hmm.
Like I have one of my good friends she's just like, you need to just like sit on the couch and be calm and just like watch TV and not do anything else. And I was like, for me, when I'm like resting, that is me sitting on the couch working on a novel or like a craft project or doing like multiple things at once. And I have just learned more and more through just like trial and error of how to like I've learned what matters to me more, I think. Like I've learned what makes me tick. And I'm more of like actively trying to transition to where I focus more on that. But then also realizing like, okay, like just because you can stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning doesn't mean you should. And so having to give myself like grace to go to bed. I know that sounds terrible, but in my head, I'm like, well, I want to do this, 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 and this today. And I'm just going to stay up until I get it all done. And then it's like, well, now it's 1 a.m. and you're teaching at 5:30 a.m. So you did this to yourself. like,
Yeah.
um, I mean, I think I'm learning. And you said a word that I've actually started to like use more in my day to day. instead of having like a schedule or having like a routine, I've been saying I have rhythms of like, it's a routine, it's routine like, but it's like each day kind of has a different rhythm to it depending on what my day holds. So
Mhm.
like this past week, I taught a lot of Pure Barre classes. So it was like that was a day that week, the rhythm was more of like making sure I was getting to bed early, prepping the night before. So when I wake up the next morning, it's like you just get dressed, like your lunch is already packed to go to the office. You've got your day like planned versus like this coming week where I'm only in the office twice. I'm not teaching as much. That rhythm will be a little more like laid back and
Mhm.
like a little more like, okay, like this week is a week to kind of sit back a little bit and focus on some other things. It's kind of like I feel like I always have competing priorities. So I'm always trying to like, okay, this is what I want to do, but this is the priority that I have to do. And so that's something I'm constantly struggling to get better at is like, just because you want to sit here and write this other thing does not mean that you like, I've got a big project at work you have to finish. I don't
You
know if
are
that
like,
answers your question.
yes, you are like speaking to the depths of my soul right now because I talk about this all the time. Like there's so many things that I'm interested in, like hobbies or passions or whatever. And so it is really challenging to like figure out, okay, what's the top priority for the day? Because there's simply only 24 hours in every
Mhm.
day. And like, yes, sleep is necessary. And so figuring out like the rhythm, like you said, is like,
Mhm.
okay, this week's rhythm is Pure Barre. This week's rhythm
Yeah.
is podcasting. This week's rhythm is whatever. Yes, I can very much relate to that. And I guess for people who are listening who don't know what the Enneagram is, do you want to give like a little bit of background to that?
Yeah, I can try to. It's like it's one of my things that I'd actually like on my list of many things I'd like to do is I would actually love to learn how to like coach it. But that's a
Oh,
future Sarah problem.
you'd be so good at that.
That's a future. I was like, that's a future Sarah endeavor. So the Enneagram is basically it's like a personality test where you have numbers 1 through 9 and you align the most with one of those numbers. And then you could potentially be like a wing of the number on either side of it. So I'm a 3. The 3 is the achiever. And, like I was joking, it's the worst one, but it is the threes are like really driven. We're the achievers, the charmers, the like, we're happiest when we're like getting things done and we're checking off lists and things like that. But like I wing to the 4, and the 4 is more of like a creative outlet. So like if you're a 3, you would wing 2 or 3. The 2's the helper. The 4 is more of a creative, like kind of dreamer. And I actually thought I was a 2 wing until I read a book called I think it was The Road Back to You, I think is what it was
Oh, I've
called.
heard of that. Yeah.
It's really good. It's a really good, like if you're looking to understand the Enneagram, it's a really good, like high level overview. And I always like people go take Enneagram tests, but I say the best way to actually figure out what you are is to read about each one and you will see yourself in one. Like I was reading the 3 and I was like, this is me. It's me. I'm being called out on paper right now. But and like, but I do think too, like for me, it helps me understand people better too when I know their numbers. Like 2 of my very best friends are 8s, and the 8 is the more like they're the like more aggressive, take charge, kind of they're the challenger is what they're called. And so like I know that about them and that helps me interact better with them. Like I have a friend who's a 9. She's the one that's always telling me to sit on the couch. She's the peacekeeper. And so for her, sitting on the couch and doing nothing is like the best day ever. And so I'm always like, I'm not you. I'm the exact opposite of you. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it is, I could go on and on about like the nuances of it, but I think it's just such an interesting, it's just another test, like a Myers-Briggs or a DISC assessment. But what I find really interesting is we do a lot of like Clifton strengths at UT, and all of my Clifton strengths are actually like Enneagram 3 traits. And so then like my like everything, every personality test I take, there's like a common thread through them. And I bet it's probably the same for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there are obviously like pros and pitfalls to every personality
Hmm.
test you could take. Like, it's obviously there are only a certain number of types in each test, and not every person is the same, but I do find them, one, I just think it's fun, but two, I do find
Yeah.
it like super interesting to not only like learn about yourself and your traits, but also to learn about like people around you, their traits. So of course, like in a workplace setting, it's really helpful, but it's also
Hmm.
helpful, I think, in like friendships, like you said, and like family
Yeah.
relationships and things, because not everyone like thinks the same and not everyone like views life from the same lens. And so it's
Hmm.
super helpful if like maybe something someone said or does like rubs you the wrong way, or like you take it personally or something like that, to really understand like, oh, like that's not how they're seeing it at all, is like I think super helpful as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I know like with my two best friends, like my very best friend Hannah, she's an 8 and she is into the enneagram, so she gets it. And so we'll just kind of sometimes just tell each other like you're being such a 3 right now, or you're being such an 8 right now. And that's almost just like our cue to reel it in.
Yeah.
But she and I was like feed off of each other. Like she's very ambitious too. So we'll be like, here's this really great idea. We're gonna just like we went to surf camp on a whim once. Like we like bought plane tickets and went to Nicaragua to surf camp just
Wait,
on a
what?
complete
I love this. Tell me more.
oh, it was legit. Like I was sitting at work and she texted me. She's like, "Do you want to go to surf camp in Nicaragua?" And I was like, "Sure." And we did. Like we went.
Oh my
It was called
God.
Chica Brava, and we went to. It was like my very favorite trip I've ever taken. We went
Wow.
to Nicaragua. We went to surf camp. We learned to surf. She still surfs. Like she's really into it. Like her and her husband go to Costa Rica or try to go about once a year and surf for a week. And I'm not a strong swimmer and the ocean kind of scares me a little bit.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I would stay in like the white water where the waves break and just like stand up on my little board and go up to the beach. And then I do that for like a half hour. And then I just sit and get like a great suntan and read books while everyone else surfed. So, but no, it was so much fun. And like just Nicaragua in general is just such an incredible country. And but yeah, that's our relationship. We're like, let's go to surf camp. Like so.
I love it. Okay, I feel like I could go down like 10 million different rabbit holes with you, but I want to circle back to one about the weight training and weightlifting that you
Mhm.
used to be really into, because I know you and I've talked about that before with your love of Define, which is
Mhm.
like the weight focused Pure Barre class type that we have now. And so I want to learn like a little bit more about that life, that past
Yeah.
Sarah as well.
So fun story there. I actually got into weightlifting like I was injured. And by injured I mean I had worn a really cute pair of boots and walked all over Europe for 2 weeks. And my feet, I developed really bad plantar fasciitis. And so I was going to a friend of mine who does like deep tissue work. And he and I were just like talking, and he's like absolutely murdering my foot. He does like miracle work on people, but like it does not feel great when he's like in that like myofascial,
Hmm.
whatever. And we're talking, and there was this gym in Charlottesville. Its name was actually the gym, and I knew he'd been going, and I was intrigued, and I was like, "What is this like the gym?" And he goes, "Well, I'm going tonight. Like, why don't you come work out with me?" And I've since learned he was actually asking me on a date, and I didn't realize it because I mean, I was like, you're just asking someone to go work out with you. Like, okay. And so I went, and he and I never dated, but I fell in love with that gym. And it was actually a powerlifting gym. And the man who owned it, he has actually since passed away, but he was this like savant about just the body and weightlifting in general, but also just like he had such a strong view on it wasn't about just like getting as strong as you can. He wanted you to be functionally fit. And
Hmm.
so he would do things like you come into his gym, he didn't let you like immediately get into a squat rack or immediately deadlift. He would make you start with like sometimes even just body weight, just to see your movement patterns, and he would progress you through. And with me, it was pretty quick where he was like, okay, come here. He's like, get under the squat rack. And so I was doing some squats, and he was like, what do you do besides this? Because he's like, you have core and glute strength that
Yeah.
other people don't have. And I told him about bar. And he's like, I'm going to come take a class. So he did. He came and took a class, and think big, giant muscle beard, tattoos, all the things. He came and took a bar class.
Amazing.
And afterward, he was like, everyone in my gym has to come do this. And so we ended up actually having a bunch of those. He trained a bunch of like Virginia State record holder powerlifters, and they would come take Pure Barre class or like bar classes with us. But I loved I loved how strong I was. And it was like really empowering to be like, wow, like I can squat. Like at one point, I could do like twice my body weight. And I didn't love competing in powerlifting because it just wasn't quite the same. Like, I don't know. I always joked that I wasn't quite like aggressive enough for it because I think you do have to have a certain level of like, just like unhingedness, maybe. I can't, or at least like the circle that I was in, like a couple of the girls that were like, they still compete, they're still like all in. They were like, they're gonna rip that deadlift off the floor. And I'd be like, you know what? It's good down there. Like,
Yeah.
but it was a lot of fun. And I really was like in the best shape of my life. And when I moved down to Chapel Hill, I joined a CrossFit gym. And very quickly, they had a barbell club. And very quickly, they convinced me to come try barbell. And so I got into like clean and jerks and snatches. And I loved that because it was just like there's like more technique to it.
Mm.
And I don't know, it was like, I would always tell my coach, I was like, it's pretty. And he's like, it's not pretty. It's like tough. And I'm like, but it's pretty. And I loved like the nuance of like, if your snatch is a couple inches too far in front of you, you're going to fail it. Like I loved that aspect of it. And so I competed for a good like 2 years. And I kind of got into a point with it. Like we did the North Carolina State Championships, and I never won a weightlifting meet, Haven. I always finished second. Ask me how I feel about that. and like, and I would only get beat by like a half a kilo or something like that because
Mm.
like the next person would just need, a kilo more to beat me or whatever. But I was starting to get just really beat up. Like my hip still bothers me. Like my hip was bothering me, and like I was just covered in bruises all the time. And when COVID hit, like that, we had just finished the national or the state championships, and I had started to kind of think like, okay, like, do I want to keep doing this? Like,
Hmm.
do I want to transition? And so with COVID, I actually blew out both wrists.
Oh
I did
man.
one. I did one before COVID. I have like, I call it the pre and post COVID wrist. Like my pre COVID wrist is my right one, and that got all the proper care needed.
Hmm.
The left one I did during COVID on my patio trying to do a clean and jerk. And that got like virtual like treatment. So
Hmm.
it's not the same. Like my left wrist, like you might see me in like a Pure Barre class, like pick my hand up off the ground during tabletop or like do something a little different because sometimes it just doesn't work right. And so I love the weightlifting. And so now I focus more though on like, that's part of why I love that we have define and bar
Hmm.
is because I still get that functional movement, but without the same like toil on my body of training for, 2 hours a day or, I was training like 4 or 5 days a week and then like competing and, you kind of get into some dangerous territory with that too or for me anyway. I don't want to speak for everyone, but like I would get really wrapped around the wheel of like my weight class and like making sure because I like hovered right around the because you always wanted to be the heaviest. My coach told me you wanted to be the heaviest in the lightest class you could compete in. And
Mm.
so there's like some mental stuff that starts to get into that. And, you wrap it around the wheel and like there's people who are like doing stuff to cut weight. And I didn't like that aspect either. Like that was really starting to bother me. And so, COVID happened and that gave me time to kind of reset and get back into like more of a functional fitness. And I think that's where I'm happiest if it's like a functional fitness and like bar low impact type stuff. Like I'm happy, my body's happy, and I'm not covered. Like my chest was always covered in bruises from like catching barbells on my like
Oh
collarbones. So
yeah.
I didn't have to do that anymore. And I'm like, that's great. And I did try. I tried to get back into it a couple of years ago, and from where I've just worn the cartilage down in my left hip, like I just couldn't do it. Like I couldn't do it without a lot of modification. And I was like,
Hmm.
well, at what point am I just like, this isn't fun because I can't like, it's that Enneagram 3 coming in. Like I used to be able to box jump, like no problem. And then all of a sudden with my hip, it's like I couldn't do it and I was having to modify it and I was mad about it. And I was like, you know what? No, you shouldn't be in the gym mad. You should be
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
if you're in the gym mad, it should be because you're working out something from the outside, like you're bringing in like a bad day at work, not just like you're mad because you can't do something that your neighbor's doing. So yeah, that's why I said love Define is because Define lets me pull out, a little bit heavier weight and lets me do some of those more functional movements like safely without a lot of like joint, like my hip doesn't hurt in Define most of the time. So
Yeah. Well, obviously we're both biased because we both teach Pure Barre, but I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing about Pure Barre is one that now there's so many different class
Mhm.
formats that you can mix stuff like that in. And two is that there's so many ways you can modify. So like for you, if you're coming in with some hip issues, if you're coming in with some wrist issues, like there's still ways to get around that where you're not going to be leaving mad because you can't do what you can't do. You can still get like a really solid workout. But I love your sentiment of like, you shouldn't be there mad unless you're working out outside stressors. Like everyone needs to like hear that again, I think, and take a good hard look at what you're doing for fitness. And if you hate it, like start trying something else. There's
Yeah.
something out there that and then it's going to be more enjoyable day to day and more sustainable long term.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it definitely should be fun. Like, it's not. I don't think you should be going. Like, I've done. Like, I wish I loved yoga. Like, I genuinely wish that I enjoyed it because I feel like it would be so beneficial to me. But I do not have fun in yoga. Like, I am bored. I sit there and I know you're supposed to zen out, but I'm like, what am I going to get for lunch? What do I have to do when I leave here? What do I like? It's not something that I enjoy doing. So I'm like, don't. There's only, like you said, there's only 24 hours in a day. Like, don't spend time doing a workout that you hate just to check off a box.
There should really be a case study. Maybe there is of like crossover enneagram types with types of workouts because honestly, I have really tried to like yoga as well and I same thing. I just
Yeah.
cannot. I know it's
The
so beneficial,
only
but
the only time I had a true zenned out yoga experience was actually in Nicaragua. We took a yoga class and we had a couple of like part of our package. It was the only time. And I think I was just like I was on the beach. I'd been out in the sun all day. We'd been like surfing. And I think I was just like my body was just tired. And so
yeah.
this is the only time I'd managed to actually like zen out. Otherwise, I'm just like, yeah. This is not my thing.
I want to shift gears and chat all things writing. So I know we keep talking about all your side hustles. Sarah does have a full-time job as well, people. I don't know how
Yeah.
she does it, but let's talk about another one of your side hustle passion projects, writing.
Yeah.
Tell us all about it.
Oh man. So I can officially say that I published a book this year, which is really exciting.
Yay!
I writing is just one of those things that I've done my entire life. My grandma she jokes about it still. She's like, all my cousins for Christmas, they always wanted, like the big shiny toy or like we go shopping and they're begging for like a new Barbie or monster truck or whatever, and I'm just like, can I have my notebook and some color pencils? Because I would just like lay in the floor and write stories. And they were always about like horses and princesses when I was younger. Like I wrote so many stories about horses and princesses, but like I've just always done it. Like it's just something I don't remember not writing. Like it's funny, like the things you do remember, like when I was in kindergarten, I would get off the bus, go into my classroom, and we had like free time in the mornings before I guess like bells ring or whatever. And like all of my classmates are playing with toys and stuff. And I would go get a book off the shelf, open it up, and sit there and like write the book. Like I would just copy the words out of the book onto a piece of paper. And my teacher told my mom, she's like, I'm just really concerned about like her social development. It's like just like weird. And clearly that's not a problem. I am very outgoing. But then like when I think it was my eighth birthday. The only thing I wanted for my eighth birthday was a typewriter. And my parents searched high and low because they were like, how do you find a typewriter? Like, what is this? And they found one, and it was like this gigantic brown. It was so ugly. It was so big, and I loved it so much. but I taught myself how to type. And I was in third grade, and I remember getting in so much trouble because third grade was just a rough year. I was like, I just I had a hard, it was not a good match between me and the teacher. And like, I was like really advanced in like reading and writing, but I struggled at math and it was a whole thing. And we were learning how to type, and it was like that sentence, something about the brown fox, like that sentence that has all
Yeah.
the words in it. We were supposed to be like typing that over and over. And I was like, well, that's just dumb. Like, I know how to type. And so I rewrote Aladdin. Like, I wrote the whole story. I typed the whole thing out. And I got in so much trouble for it because she was like, you didn't follow instructions. You didn't. And like, God bless my parents because, like, I had to go home and tell them, like, she wants to have a conversation with you. And this is what I did. And my parents were like, well, why are we going to punish her for that? Like, why are
Yeah.
we? And so it's just something that I'd always done. And I kind of, it was like ebb and flow. Um, and I got out of it a little bit for a while. Just, life gets busy and you start doing other things. And then, not to turn kind of sad for a second, but like my mom passed away back in April 2019. And I couldn't like get a moment. Like my family is very big, they're very loud, there's a lot going on. And like nothing was distracting me. So, like, in the middle of it all, like I'm trying to read, watch TV, nothing was working. And I had just finished watching um Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix. And I think it was season two. It had ended on this like big cliffhanger, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I was like, I'm just gonna write. Like I hadn't wrote a fan fiction in a really long time. And if fan fiction, if anyone's like, what is that? It's when like someone like takes characters that exist and they like write a story and post it online or whatever. And I was like, I'm just gonna try it. So I actually wrote the book that I published in January was actually started out as a Sabrina fan fiction. And it was like its own thing. And I took it and like edited it and made it its own like world. But I have like 20 some odd manuscripts just like sitting on my laptop that I'm slowly working my way through because my brain is just like at any given point, my brain is thinking up a story idea or it's like, and I wish I could like visualize my brain a little bit and like, show people what happens in my mind at any given time because it doesn't like it blows my mind that there are people who don't have like inner voices like
Hmm.
they don't because I can be teaching a Pure Barre class and there's a part of my brain that is genuinely over here being like, so what if this guy went ahead and he did this thing and then like or like I'm in work and at work and I'm fully engaged in a meeting and like I'm in senior leadership. Like I have a pretty big job and I'm over here like thinking at the same time I'm speaking out loud, I'm thinking about this whole fictional world. And so it's just something that I love so much. And, I kind of used my mom passed away kind of, she didn't fulfill a lot of her dreams. And, some of that was like self-choice, but some of that too was just like she didn't know how or she didn't, wasn't comfortable taking a risk. And I was like, you know what? I want to publish a book. And the only way to do it is to actually do it. And so I self-published back in January and I'm going to do another one again here soon and just kind of see what happens with it. I would love, I've been calling it my Quicksilver moment. There's a book that blew up on TikTok called Quicksilver, and I read a lot of romantasy. It is full stop romantasy. And I read it over the summer and was like, man, I love this book. And it was like not a perfect book. There's some typos, things like that. But it was so good. And it blew up on TikTok. And it was an indie author, kind of same path that I'm on right now. And she just got it picked up by a publisher and it's in stores. And like I saw it in Target the other night. And I was like, I want my Quicksilver moment. And so I going into 2025 with like a much more like plan. Like I've gotten more serious about it. And I don't know, it's just a thing that like it doesn't feel like work to me. Like when I sit down to write or even edit, I don't feel like I'm working. It's just something that comes so naturally to me and just like makes me so happy. And I'm always just like, what's the next idea? And I always know that I have something when to me it feels like the characters are quite literally sitting next to me telling me what to do. Um, you're talking about me living different lives. Like I was in film school out in LA
Yes,
because
we haven't even touched on this yet. Oh my gosh.
because writing, like posting the writing online really, like sometimes you feel a little silly. You're like, you're writing fan fiction, but it does give you feedback. And I was like, maybe I'm not terrible at this. And a lot of people were like, this is so visual, you should write for TV. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, I could do that. And then I read Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes, which I highly recommend. And she says something into it to the effect of like, they say getting into USC film school is harder than getting into Harvard. So I decided I'd go do it. And I was like, yeah, I will too. So I didn't know how to write a script. I had no idea. I spent COVID teaching myself how to write a script. And I did it just by like reading books and like actually reading scripts. And I got into multiple options, got to do that. And, it's one of those things where I learned like I was a really good writer, really good storyteller, absolutely not an LA girl. So, I had a professor that kind of told me, he's like, Sarah, you can make TV shows and write in other ways. You don't have to stay and do this. And this was the same professor who had sat me down and been like, you need to go into development. You're so good at this. You need to do this. And he was also the one that was like, you'd be miserable doing this. So I think picture blue sky, like biggest dream would be to have like something I write become like a bigger thing. But you have to do it. Like, I've clearly been willing to try things over the course of my life and like learn from them and move into the next thing. And so that's where we are with writing right now, is we're just trying it out. Like I published Off the Record in January. I know it's not perfect. The paperback cover has a typo on the back, and I could fix it. I could fix it and like re-upload it and whatever. I'm like, you know what? Let it ride. It's fine. It's totally fine. Because it's just, you know, figuring it out. Like you have to go through it to get through it, I guess. And yeah, that's my little spiel about writing. Like I could just, I mean, that's what I'm gonna do this afternoon. I'm gonna have a book club at 3, and then I'm just gonna sit down and like edit something for the rest of the afternoon and be perfectly happy about it.
I love it. And I mean, going back to Enneagram, like I think that's what separates Enneagram 1 from the Enneagram 3 in my mind. Like simplifying it, the Enneagram 1 is like the perfectionist, but I think there's a lot of similar traits as far as like wanting to do well, being goal driven, being ambitious. But I think the difference between the 1 and the 3 is like the 1 can be like almost crippled by the perfectionism of
Mhm.
like never putting something out there because they want it to be perfect before they do. Whereas the 3 is like, I want to achieve and check off. And so I'm going to do it. And good, done is better. Like, what's the phrase?
Done is better than perfect. Yeah.
Getting it out there. I think it's like, that's so brave, you know? Like, it is
Yeah.
really scary to put your work out there like that and then be open to feedback and not knowing how it's going to be perceived. And I think that that's
Yeah.
like so incredible that you've done that. It's super, super inspiring. And,
I mean,
you know, I'm really sorry about your mom. Like that is a really challenging thing.
mhm.
I can't pretend like I know what it's like to go through
Yeah.
something like that. But I'm glad that, you know, writing you found it as an outlet, especially I'm sure during like when it was very raw and
Mhm.
like you're clearly channeling her and like her dreams by like doing all of this. Cause like I don't think anyone could say like, oh, like Sarah didn't go out and try and do what she wanted to do. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And I think
Yeah.
that's like that's the best way to live is like just try instead of like
Yeah.
having that wonder and what if and regret.
Yeah. I feel like you're doing that with this podcast too. Like you're putting out something into the world that you're so passionate about and you care about so much. And you just have to do it and just hope for the best. And, it's scary because people can be mean. They can say, oh, like, I didn't like this, I didn't like the book or whatever. And it's like, you have to just be like, that's okay. I did it. I try to like keep that Brene Brown quote about if you're not in the arena getting your butt kicked. She doesn't say butt, but I'll say butt for the podcast. She, uh, she says something like, if you're not in the arena getting your butt kicked, then you don't get to have an opinion.
Yeah.
And I really like, I kind of embraced that because I feel like that's like it's true, like I know people who are very critical about just not maybe not me, but like other things in life. But it's like, well, you talk a lot about this thing that you'd like to do, but day after day after day, you don't go after it. And if you don't go after something, it's not going to happen. That's just the way it is. Like um, you have to be like willing to try and willing to fail, and then you have to fail forward. Like you have to
Yeah.
learn by failing forward. So, yeah, I keep that quote kind of like I've got it like tacked up in a few places. Like it's in my office at work, and it's like sometimes it's written on, I write notes to myself on my bathroom mirror, like little quotes and mantras
Yes.
and stuff. And so sometimes it's written on my mirror depending on the day. But yeah, I like that like mantra of like, you know what, if you're not trying, you don't get an opinion.
Yes.
It's a little like hard line, but it's also kind of like there's some truth to it, I think.
No, I agree because that can, fear of what other people think can stop so many people from doing what they want to
Mhm.
do. But like at the end of the day, it's your life and you have to decide if you want to just go for something. So,
Yeah, it was someone, I can't remember who it was, but they told me, and it stuck with me, even though I can't remember who said it. It was something like fear will always give you an excuse not to do something. So like if you're looking for a reason not to do something, like fear is like right there willing to tell you why you don't do it. I was like, man, that's so true. Like I can think of, a dozen. I'm going to Turks and Caicos in the spring, and I'm like, well, like I'm a little bit afraid of this super sketchy plane I have to get on to get there, but
yeah.
like, you know, not gonna let like fear telling me that like I mean I've seen photos, it's literally duct tape. Like it's fine.
Uh,
We're fine. It's all fine. But it's like, yeah, I mean that's a kind of a extreme example, but I mean I do think like there's fear can be a good thing, but it can also be a thing that just holds you back. So you have to decide if you're willing to be just decide if you're willing to make a fool of yourself. And I feel like with me and like writing and stuff, I am. And like I put stuff out there. I used my real name. Like that was a whole thing. I had someone like DM me just out of like she took it upon herself. I don't know her in real life. And she like gave me all this list of reasons why I shouldn't publish under my real name. And I was like, I mean, I'm proud of what I wrote, and I'm fully aware that like my grandmother is going to read this, and I'm okay with that. Like, it's fine. I'm like, you know, so
well, I think it's so amazing that you're doing it. And speaking of, I know you just shared recently on Instagram about some pieces you have in the works. So do you want to give us a
so
little
many.
preview of what might
Oh
be
man.
coming?
Yeah, so I wrote a little Christmas novella that I'm gonna try. I actually wanted to get it out sooner, but we've clearly established I've got a lot going on. So I'm hoping to get that out in like sometime this week. I'm just gonna kind of like publish it and call it a day. Like that one's not gonna have like a ton of fun like fanfare and stuff, but it's just something that I've been working on for a while, and I'm like, we'll just publish it and get it out there as an ebook. And then early 2025, I don't have a exact title. Like it might stick with, I've been calling it Strictly Business. I might change the title. I haven't quite decided. That's just a fun little, it could be a standalone. It could be a series. I haven't decided yet, but it's just a fun little, like rom-com with like, from my time living in Nashville, I've spent a lot of time around like musicians and stuff. And so I kind of like pieced together pieces of a musician to make this kind of wild and free country music singer who loves the great outdoors. And then there's Olivia, who is a marketing professional. And I was like, kind of like me. And she needs him to like sign on as a spokesperson for her company. And of course he won't do it unless she says, unless like he wants to test the equipment. And he's like, but you have to do it with me. And so it's like this fun, like adventure filled story. And then the one I'm really excited about. So I'm obsessed with the book Fourth Wing, the whole Fourth Wing series. And I had wrote, so back in the day, my job, when I first started my job at UT, I didn't have a lot to do. And I can't believe that was ever a time because now I'm like, how do like, my head is never above water. Um, but I had all this downtime. And so I was like, I'm just going to like play with this a little bit. And so I wrote this totally like in the Fourth Wing book, it's like there's magic and there's dragons and there's, enemies to lovers and all this stuff. And I just wrote this thing, and it was supposed to be just a few chapters of like one night stand with a brother's best friend situation. But then I just started writing it, and it came out to be a 300,000 word thing that I wrote over like course of like 7 months. It's got almost 1,000 comments online. Like it became like this own, like I read it and can't believe I wrote it.
Yeah.
And it's very much like you don't see a lot of fourth wing in it. Like it became its own thing. And it kind of went from like this just like quick and dirty little thing that I was writing to this thing where it gets really into like mental health and there's like all this political stuff to it. I don't know, I'm really proud of it. And so I'm going to release that as a 5 book series. Have
Oh,
3 of them I have 3 of them done, like not done, like what I published online is really like 3 books. And so I've divided it up and I'm like deep in the edits. Then I'll write 2 more from like other characters' perspective. So that'll start coming out sometime next year. And that's the one I'm so excited about, and I can't wait to like get it out. And I've got some other things that I'm working on too, but those are the ones that are like coming in 2025 that I'm really, really excited about. So the political game just became its own entity. And I mean, I get stories. I think it's my favorite part is people will like send me stories about like, I read this. Like there was a woman recently, she's like, I read this and it gave me like courage to leave my relationship. And like she shared like some really deeply personal stuff. And I'm like, I don't feel like I'm worthy of but I'm like, so like, wow, like this is just like something that I did for fun. That hi, Griff. Griff has joined the podcast. But it's like something that just became like so much more. And it was something that never, I mean, I would sit down and write like 2,000 words a day and like think I'd been writing for like an hour and I'd been like 6 hours of my day was gone. Yeah, you helped, didn't you? Griff helped.
Okay. I think we covered most of the things that I had noted that I wanted to make sure we talked about. Am I forgetting anything that you're like, oh, I'm also doing this other project?
No, I mean, I think we covered it. I mean, like you said, you start to talk about it, and you're like, man, I really have lived multiple lives.
Yes.
But
Okay, well then I'm gonna move us into some final like wellness final questions and rapid fire if you're ready for
oh,
it.
yes, this is fun.
Okay, maybe this has changed multiple times and maybe it changes daily for you, but currently, what's your favorite workout?
It is definitely defined, and I mean, it's Pure Barre in general, but it's definitely currently defined. I do think, though, my hot take, I think classic is the hardest class type. And I still love classic, but yeah, they put me in a Pure Barre defined class, taking or teaching all day long.
Yes. Yeah, Sarah was meant to teach Define. If you're in Knoxville, you should go and take her Define class. It's amazing. Okay, what's your favorite food? Or a few favorites?
Oh, oh man, I love peanut butter. But to be very clear, I love the peanut butter that's really bad for you, like the generic, like Target brand, Kroger brand, like whatever the cheap generic brand is. I love it, like so much so that I can't buy it because I will like just eat it with a spoon. Like, and it's like, yeah, like the more expensive, healthy stuff, that's fine, tastes great. But there's something about that, like cheap, like terrible for you store bought. I love it. I love it. I have no shame.
Okay, rapid fire. Are you ready?
Yes.
Morning or evening workout?
I'm gonna actually say morning, even though I've been going evening most of the time.
Running or walking?
Walking,
Lifting or body weight?
lifting.
Indoor or outdoor workouts?
Oh, outdoor, I think.
Move the bar class outside. I'm all for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Juice or smoothie?
Smoothie,
Coffee or matcha?
coffee all day, literally all day.
Hot or iced coffee?
I'm a hot coffee girl.
Too. Salad or bowl?
Salad,
Pizza or pasta?
pizza,
Tacos or quesadilla?
tacos,
An early riser or night owl?
both. I shouldn't be both, but I'm both. I
Get some
love early
sleep.
mornings. I know.
Okay, Sarah, tell everyone where they can get your book, where they can follow along to keep up with all of your upcoming projects.
Oh man. Okay. So I have My book is on Amazon. It is called Off the Record, and that book is only available through Amazon. Future books will be, now that I've learned how to do this a little more, future books will be more widely available. But my website is just sarahwyland.com. I have two Instagram accounts. I have one that's just Sarah Wyland, but that one I don't really do a ton. I mean, I like post a bunch of stories on it, usually about college sports, because that's another love of mine. But where I do most of my like actual community and writing and talk such is Sarah Wyland Writes. And it's that on Instagram. And I've started to figure out TikTok. Like I've been on
Oh,
TikTok for a couple of weeks and I'm actually like having fun. Like our friend Rachel actually texted me. She's like, "So you TikTok now?" I'm like, I mean, I have a TikTok that I'm posting things on. I don't know if I TikTok, but
it's a verb.
yeah, I was like, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm trying. Because that's just like a place where a lot of like that's like book talk and all that stuff. But yeah, those are, I say all the time that's probably the best thing that the University of Tennessee did for me as a student was have me. I had to buy my domain and my email and all that. Like I had to get my name as those things. And so I'm so glad that they had me do that back when, because now like I own it like across like my URLs and my email addresses and everything is just my first and last name, maybe with rights behind it, depending on what it is. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Amazing. And we'll link it all in the show notes as well. So if you're listening, you can just scroll on down, give her a follow, just pop that book in your Amazon cart. I know it's too easy to buy stuff on Amazon because I do it all the time. So check it all out. But Sarah, thanks so much for coming on. It was just so
Thank
much
you.
fun.
I just love that you do this. And I hope people listening know that you truly, like, you are the most, like, genuine, like, you genuinely want to help people with this podcast. And I just hope I hope they know that because it's so true. And you're just such a, like, just lovely soul. Like, I just love you. So,
Oh, I just love you. And you're saying so many kind things, and I just reciprocate them all. So thanks for joining us.
yeah, thanks for letting my dogs join us on occasion too. Like, I knew it was going to happen, but, here we are. So,
We'll share a photo on Instagram with the
yeah,
pups.
they like attention. So.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Health by Haven podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review. It makes such a huge difference in reaching new people and spreading the joy of healthy living. I would also be so appreciative if you subscribe to the show in the listening app of your choice so you never miss an episode. Your support truly means the world to me. Have a happy, healthy day, and I'll talk to you again soon.